Hey people, this is The Constant Show where we talk about movies, and I am Constant, a flamingo mingler. And this week we're going to talk about two pieces of fiction, Steel and Real Steel. What are they, you ask? That's a good question. Well, Real Steel is a 2011 action movie starring Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, Wolverine. And Steel is an episode of The Twilight Zone. What's interesting is they share some key plot points, both being derived from the works of Richard Matheson. In particular, they share the common idea that it's set in like a future society where boxing has been outlawed because it's inhumane to do to people. So instead of it, they have robot boxing. The protagonist in both of these stories is a former human boxer who lives vicariously through his bot. What's really interesting, though, is despite sharing elements of storytelling design and plot structure, they're kind of parallel opposites when it comes to like the deeper meanings of these works. Let's start with Steel. Steel was set in a different time, both in terms of story and what was going on in the world around it. Serling himself thought that boxing would be outlawed within 5 years of the episode's release, after a 1962 bout between Emil Griffith III and Benny Paret that resulted in Benny Paret's death 10 days later in the hospital. There was a lot of blame that went around because of that match. Some point to the referee who took 29 unanswered blows to stop the action. Some point to the corner for not throwing in the towel sooner. It's undeniable that Griffith himself felt some portion of the blame, being the person who inflicted these wounds, and us as fans for wanting this kind of violence. The reason that I bring this up is because this incident is particularly relevant to the way that the story of Steel is told. So in Steel, the main character owns a B2, which is an old, beaten up kind of robot. They're all the way up to B7s. It's got a lot of face damage. It's worn down. The mechanic is like, "Hey, I can't fix this. This is going to be more expensive than it's worth." He talks about him kind of like an old car. Whereas the guy's like, "You gotta fix him. You gotta do something." It's the Twilight Zone. Everybody has funny accents. You just go with it. In the episode, the mechanic at one point tells him, "We can scrape up some money. We can get together a B4. I know somebody who's selling those." And he tells him that you can't replace this particular robot. They've gone through stuff together. It's a journey. So then he gets the idea in his head that he's going to go out there and fight in place of his robot so that he can get the money to get replacement parts for it. And this goes about as well as you would expect a fight between a person and a fighting robot to go, with the fighting robot mostly just beating down on him. As the fight's going on, the crowd is jeering at him. They're yelling stuff like, "Oh, this outdated B2, what a piece of garbage." Even though it's a human that's in there, right? It draws your sympathies inward. He lies there after the match and he is wrecked. He's bleeding and bruised, and he stares up at his robot, who's pretty much in the same condition that he is. And it ends on this profound kind of moment of empathy between them. Despite being a story that's at its core about violence, it's also about the depths of human compassion. That the shape of a person alone is enough to unite our existence. This machine is unfeeling and unthinking, but it crosses just far enough over into Uncanny Valley for him to attribute human-like worth to it, and it gives it the kind of value that a man could ruin himself for. In 2011, when Real Steel was released, what it meant to be a fighter was starting to become different, with figures such as Anderson Silva and Floyd Mayweather at the top of both of their sports at the time of release, both of whom had a very fancy in the ring style. They're super elusive. Both had dominant reigns. To people like the monstrous Brock Lesnar crossing over from the WWE into the UFC, we were beginning to see a new outlook on the way that fighters embrace celebrity. I think it was always present in combat sports. Ali practically invented the celebrity fighter decades earlier. But with the advent of social media, it was never easier for fighters to market themselves and for fans of the sport to weave stories of their legacies. So in Real Steel, the bots in the movie are manually controlled mini Gundams. They're all super angular, very cool designs, as opposed to the human-like robots that we see in the original Steel. At one point, Hugh Jackman / Wolverine explains that the reason for this is because it was easier for the audience to dehumanize the bots if they looked far enough from human. which I think is an interesting angle to take considering the predecessor film's way of dealing with that issue. Whereas in the original, it was pretty clear that they were going to trend towards outlawing robot boxing too as the robots became more and more developed. Like that they would eventually cross that threshold of like, whoa, it's no longer cool to put those guys in there either. But in this one, they just went the opposite direction, and they were like, we want as much carnage and spectacle as possible. Our protagonist in the movie Real Steel actually gets 2 of his robots destroyed through his own negligence. The first one, he puts up against a bull, he's winning the fight, and then all of a sudden, what do you know, he showboats, and then he just... Which is a valuable lesson, and it's like, fool me once, shame on you. He gets a championship fighting robot, and you're like, this is going to be crazy insane. It responds to voice commands. It's got like a whole list of combos in there. This thing is like the character that you don't let your friends pick. We're not playing this game if you're playing the robot who gets 47 combos that you just have to say 3 words to execute. That's not fair. But what do you know? He loses the fight anyways, gets completely destroyed. After watching the first movie, where you're like, oh, I kind of care about robots now. This was not a good second film to follow that. And then Hugh Jackman encounters his abandoned son. I'm not even going to touch on that one. That's for a much different video. But him and his abandoned son find Adam, which is a training bot, which can take a beating, and it can mirror, like... fighting styles because it's a training bot. So it would have to do the stuff that other robots do. Clever. I liked it. I was with it. He advances through a gauntlet of enough robot gimmick boxers to make Punch-Out kind of blush before becoming the world champion. The core of the movie is the spectacle of warring machines, the coolness of like the fights. Back to the initial question. What separates them? I think the thing that separates them the most is that they have different perspectives on fighting. Steel is a story that's told from the inside of the ring, the difficulties and hardships of a fight career. When you reach points where you're no longer making enough to cover the injuries that you're sustaining fighting. One of the reasons that the protagonist of Steel can substitute for his robot is because they look that close to human. They bruise, they bleed. Then we place a regular human into those shoes, and it's very easy for us to draw that immediate connection. Real Steel is a story that's told from the outside of the ring. When you're a fan and your only real concern with it is like the best possible show. They explicitly state in Real Steel that the robots were dehumanized, of course, to legitimize the carnage that they undergo. There's this stark divide in the way that the two films treat robots. The robot in Steel isn't even as sophisticated as Adam is. He doesn't have like a mirror function. He's got like a defense setting, and like an attack setting. And then I'm guessing the third one is automatic because it looked like there were only 3 switches back there. But Adam can full on just like store combos and stuff. And he even responds to like voice commands once they put the thing in his head, which isn't a thing I think that the Steel robots could do. But despite being somehow more human in terms of like their cognition, they're less human in the surrounding world's treatment of them. The mirror function, rather than being a way to sort of express that lack of difference between man and machine, is used to turn Adam into a further medium for Hugh Jackman / Wolverine's personal feelings towards fighting. It's just him getting a second chance at it. In Steel, it's sort of the opposite way around. Like the guy is getting himself beat in order to give the robot a second chance at life. I enjoyed Real Steel, but I feel like it missed some of the key importance that the original had in highlighting the mistreatment of fighters within the sport. There's this tug of war between fight actuality and fighter safety, where the more rules you have, the more of a sport something is, the less of an actual fight it is. And it's a hard question to answer. Part of me thinks that like you should just let people do what they want to do if that only affects them. But at the same time, I worry about those that lay their bodies on the line. I sympathize with how much hate they take when they literally give their all to compete in a sport. There's no other sport where you have a 50-50 shot of, just getting ruined. Like, I feel like you can play like a whole season of football, you maybe get injured one game, that's like 1 in 16 chance of injury, probably. I don't know the specific odds, But in a fight, somebody is always getting hit at least half the time. Or if you're in a ground and pound situation, then you're just getting like completely exhausted for like 30 minutes straight. It's a lot to do. I'm getting tired just talking about it. I had so much work just putting on these things, it's ridiculous. I love fighting. I think fighting's amazing. I love it in literally every form. I like it when anime characters are just screaming numbers at each other. I like when people share those videos and it's just like some street fight and they're flustering to land a single blow. I love professional fighting where, you know, two of the most dangerous athletes in the world train to like peak perfection with RPG levels of grinding and a sweatshop of willpower. Just going toe to toe. But at the same time, as a fan of the sport, we have to take better care of those that participate in it. Because if we want more fights, better fights, more champions, then like you gotta make being a champion of these sports like a thing worth being, and like even after you've walked off the stage. Portrait of a losing side. Proof positive that you can't outpunch machinery. Proof also of something else. That no matter what the future brings, man's capacity to rise to the occasion will remain unaltered. His potential for tenacity and optimism continues. As always, to outfight, outpoint, and outlive any and all changes made by his society, for which 3 cheers and a unanimous decision are rendered. From the Twilight Zone.